They called him Elijah Croft, the ragman prophet of Black Hollow, a name whispered with more dread than reverence. Born under the shroud of a solar eclipse in 1713, Elijah was said to have spoken his first word in a dead language. His mother, a midwife gone mad, swore the child had black eyes until his 7th day, not in the open square where all could see, nor inside the chapel where his shadow might fall on the altar. No, they built a pyre for him in the suffocating heart of the forest, far from prying eyes and accusing ears. Round it they gathered, each clutching a burning torch like a funeral pyre in the sky. They watched him walk into the flames, his silhouette a mockery of the cross on the chapel wall. And as the fire consumed him, they heard his voice, raspy yet clear, saying, "This, too, shall pass." Then he was gone, reduced to ashes and memory. Yet the following spring, when the snow melted and the earth yielded its dead, they found Elijah Croft, the ragman prophet, hanging by the roots beneath the very tree he'd climbed to meet his fate. His limbs were twisted like the branches that had held him, his face leering, his eyes wide and accusing. The rope had been fashioned from the hempen bedding in his cell, the hempen bedding that Reverend Thorn himself had blessed and laid upon the martyr just hours before. And dangling beside him was the charred remains of a single black feather, the only trace of the fire. To this day, no one knows how he escaped nor why. Reverend Thorn cut Elijah down, the townspeople buried him properly, but no one ever forgave him, and every year on the anniversary of his death, they find something in the ashes, some small token left by a creature of darkness. For good or ill, they knew they'd made a powerful enemy that day, an enemy whose patience had worn thin like the last shred of a funeral shroud. And though the village priest dismissed it as grief-stained delusion, none could deny that strange things followed the boy wherever he went. Livestock miscarried at his approach, children had night terrors if they glimpsed him past dusk, and clocks in the chapel refused to tick in his presence. He grew into a crooked-limbed man with a voice like oil on old parchment. He sold rags and scraps door to door, yet never seemed to need money nor food. The people of Black Hollow feared him, but they also consulted him, in secret, of course, when a child was sick with no fever. When a husband returned from war with glassy eyes and unholy rage, it was Elijah they turned to. He knew herbs the apothecaries had never named, spoke phrases that made the fire in the hearth stutter, and he always warned all debts are paid one way or another. The vicar, Reverend Thorn, despised him, a gaunt man with a sunken chest and fanatical eyes. Thorn preached that Elijah was a blasphemer, a necromancer, an unrepentant devil among them. But the villagers remembered the storm he'd quelled with a chant no one understood, the blindness he reversed in old Lady Bellamy with nothing but a pinch of ash. They dared not love him, but neither could they discard him. Instead, they tolerated him the way one might endure a crack in the church's stained glass window, fearful of what might come through if it ever shattered completely. But time frayed the threads of caution. One winter, a boy went missing near the woods. His mother claimed she'd seen Elijah speaking to the trees the night before, a lit candle on his tongue. When they found the child's shoes buried beside a circle of soot, the village snapped. A mob was raised, crude justice stirred by Reverend Thorn's firebrand sermons. Elijah was dragged from his shack, his face calm, his eyes watching them like he'd seen this dream before. They accused him of sorcery, of consorting with the devil, of cursing the land. Elijah didn't beg. He simply said, "You think you know evil because it wears rags and speaks in riddles. But true evil is dressed in robes and reads from holy books." That was the final offense. He was sentenced not by trial, but by trembling consensus. They feared his words more than his deeds. It was decided that his execution must be silent. So they did the unthinkable. They burned him. In a world where darkness whispers and shadows dance, there existed a tale so chilling it sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to speak its name. It spoke of a man named Elijah, whose fate was a grim reminder of the thin veil that separated our world from the abyss. His eyes gleaming with an unearthly light as he muttered in a language older than time itself. His words, they claimed, were nails hammered into the coffin of their souls. With each syllable, their minds recoiled as if burned by fire. That's when they made a choice, snow blanketed the earth, only a stone roughly carved with the word silenced. But Black Hollow did not rest easy, and some silences echo louder than screams in the dead of night. As the embers of this chilling narrative fade, let us hope we never encounter a silence that screams, for in the grand tapestry of human experience, there are some threads best left unwoven, some chapters left unread. Within a week, the snow turned red thin streaks like veins across the land. Chickens laid eggs full of ash. Children began sleepwalking in circles, murmuring in that same dead language his mother had once described. And worst of all, the villagers began hearing a voice not aloud, but inside, a presence in their dreams, pressing behind their eyes like smoke through a keyhole. They had sewn his mouth shut, but they had not silenced him, and the trees were bare like waiting witnesses. As the noose was tightened, Elijah did not resist, but a crow landed on his shoulder and refused to leave. One man tried to strike it away and broke his wrist without touching it. The bird stared into Elijah's sewn mouth as though listening to what no one else could hear. When they hung him, the sky turned a strange yellow, not gold sickly, sulphurous, like a candle burned too long. And though his body twitched and jerked like any man might in the throes of forced death, the silence was deafening. It was said you could not even hear the wind through the trees that morning. The only sound was the creak of rope, a choice born out of desperation and veiled in the guise of mercy. Elijah was a man possessed by an otherworldly entity, his words weaving chaos and calamity in their wake. In a world where sanity was a fragile flame, his ravings threatened to extinguish it entirely. Bells tied to each corner so his silence would be heard in echo. Mothers averted their children's eyes. Old men held their hats to their chests. No one threw stones not out of pity but fear. For Elijah stared back with the patience of something that had seen the end already written, and so they sought to silence him, but not in a way that this world could comprehend. Oh no, this was a silence far more profound, a silence stitched together with the macabre threads of an ancient ritual. They found him in the dead of night. They sewed his mouth shut, not with fine thread, but with the sinew of a stag slaughtered on St. Elric's Day, because they believed holy meat would bind unholy words. The needle used had once closed the wound of a plague victim, long buried, and the one who wielded it was no tailor, but Reverend Thorn himself. The needle trembled in his hand, and some say he wept, though others claim he whispered a psalm with every puncture. Elijah's lips, once serpentine and sharp, became grotesque and bloated. Blood trickled down his chin like wine from a cracked chalice. They paraded him through the square. In a wooden cage, they took him to Gallows Hill at dawn. They buried him at the edge of the woods, beneath the crooked tree where moss grew in winter. No cross marked the grave, and so the tale serves as a haunting reminder that some doors are best left unopened, some voices are better left unheard. And so our story ends, or perhaps it's where it begins. For this is a tale told twice, thrice, 100-fold across the earth in years. In the years that followed, Black Hollow withered, those ancient forces that predated scripture and survived in whisper and shadow. Others say he was never human, merely a vessel for truths too old and too terrible to be spoken aloud. But all agreed on one thing: it had not been justice, where the uncanny rides just beyond the edge of sight, but from your own mouth, speaking things you've never learned, you'll wake unable to speak again. The soil is fertile ground for the strange and the terrible. Here, where the trees have roots in the memories of the damned, they gather round the grave marked silenced. Here, in the hushed darkness of the forgotten cemetery, the truth may set you free, but it may also shatter your soul. They lay down to rest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truth that lies just beyond the veil, but with truths behind your eyes that make the stars blink. They listen for the voice that rises from the grave, a voice that promises to unlock the secrets of the universe. But at what cost? For some, the voice offers forbidden knowledge, fragments of a reality that exists just beyond the edges of human perception. Others hear the echoes of their own souls, their deepest fears and desires laid bare. For some, these are no more than nursery rhymes, where the whispers of forgotten gods dance on the wind. Drawn by the promise of enlightenment, they venture into the darkness, seeking the truth that lies in wait. For some, the voice offers solace, a connection to something greater than themselves. But for most, It is a descent into madness, a glimpse behind the curtain of reality that drives them to the brink of oblivion. There are those who dare to tread the path less traveled, who seek out the liminal spaces where the rules of reality are rewritten. They begin to realize that the truth can be a dangerous thing. For those who seek it out, the knowledge they gain comes at a terrible price. Their minds are fractured, their sanity hanging by a thread. They return home forever changed, their eyes haunted by the secrets they have unearthed. They are drawn to places like Black Hollow, where the earth itself seems to remember what the townsfolk have tried so desperately to forget. Cautionary whispers to keep children from wandering too close to the woods at twilight. But others hear echoes of a deeper truth in these tales, a truth that lingers in the spaces between the words, in the silences that stretch like grave clothes over some unspeakable horror. It had been fear wearing the mask of righteousness, and it had birthed a curse stitched in meat and silence. Crops sprouted in twisted shapes, rain fell like soot, and wild dogs roamed in packs with human-like stares. The church burned one Easter morning. No fire, just smoke and screams. They found Reverend Thorn in the pulpit, mouth agape, tongue black and split like a serpent's. Carved into his chest were the words, "Amen" means "so be it," and so it was. The villagers who remained became shadows of themselves. They rarely spoke, and when they did, their voices were too soft, as if afraid to summon something. Those who had sewn the stitches, 5 men, and 1 woman, all died with their mouths torn open from the inside, not by blade nor beast, but as if something within them had grown impatient with the silence and clawed its way out. Some say Elijah had made a pact not with hell, but with the forgotten gods of the woods. In 1792, a new family arrived in Black Hollow. They were met by silence and blank stares. Within weeks, their youngest daughter disappeared. The father claimed she'd spoken of a man with sewn lips, who whispered through the floorboards. They fled the village that same night, leaving behind all possessions. By 1803, Black Hollow had vanished from most maps. Travelers reported strange fogs in that region, compasses spinning wildly, and dreams that left scars upon waking. There are those who seek out such tales, stories that burrow under the skin of reality. They say that if you find the grave marked silenced and sleep beside it, you will hear a voice not from the earth, in a world where the veil between realities is thin. For here, beneath the weight of unspoken horrors, when the sun bleeds out across the horizon and the shadows grow long, but as the night deepens and the whispers grow louder yet still, the seekers come. So if you ever find yourself drawn to the whispers from the grave, be warned, the price of knowledge is steep.